Okay, so Cosimo de' Medici, he was born in 1389 on this day of September and died in 1464. So Cosimo di Giovanni de' Medici, born on the 27th of September 1389, was an Italian banker and politician who established the Medici family as effective rulers of Florence during much of the Italian Renaissance. His power derived from his wealth as a banker, and he was a patron of arts, learning, and architecture. He spent over 600,000 gold florins, approximately 500 million inflation adjusted. Anyway, these are probably American calculations, on art and culture, including Donatello's David, the first freestanding nude male sculpture since antiquity. Despite his influence, his power was not absolute. Florence legislative councils at times resisted his proposals throughout his life, and he was viewed as the first among equals rather than an autocrat. This was not a bad thing. It's true, when I first arrived in Florence, without actually knowing much about Florence and without knowing that it was a banking center, very important, I felt somehow that the city of the Renaissance par excellence had something impure. Now, this is my perception, because I always hated money and money hated me in return. But I am on the side of Charles Baudelaire, who in L'Étranger, the stranger, said to the one who asked him, do you believe in gold? Do you love gold? And he said, I hate it in as much as you hate God. So Charles Baudelaire, the poet, placed dichotomically money and God. Well, this is something not always done and not always thought. This was Cosimo de' Medici, who in a way was, the father of the Renaissance or Renaissantist Florence. Now, if we are to judge him based on this portrait, we wouldn't really say that he was a very happy man. He was like kind of pale, and but still, this being said, you would say that this man who was, I think, I should have known who actually painted this portrait by him, but to my shame, I don't. But it's very masterfully painted, and I imagine that it's a very truthful portrait of this man, of this banker who needed books, who needed art, who needed architecture that was, uplifting, and who needed the Neoplatonic Academy. And I guess he was an example of that man who understands that it doesn't matter how much money you have, if you don't have higher ideas, if you don't have art, if you don't have culture, if you don't have sacred books translated, or if they are not translated, you pay for the translation, as he actually did, because the writings of Plato were translated at his request, and he paid for that thing to happen, to have Plato translated into Latin from Greek. So, I think perhaps we are in some kind of an hourglass relationship, that yes, the idealist one, the artist, has difficulty with money, but the one with the money supports the artist, the rebellious artist. And I truly like this portrait, because I see this man who was actually, he might have been very powerful, so to speak, financially speaking, but I see his fundamental fragility, weakness, is the human condition, is the existential condition that we all share. And maybe exactly from this vulnerability or weakness derived his deep interest in supporting art and supporting culture. He was patron and confidante of Fra Angelico, a great painter. Here we see a painting by Fra Angelico, Annunciation. And yes, when I look at these artworks, of course, it's very easy to idealize, but it's something beautiful about this devotion that these artists, and some of the greatest actually, where he sponsored them, so to speak, he sustained them. They constitute the soul of the Renaissance. And even if Florence was corrupted to an extent because of these banks which prospered, and we know how the banks prosper, art did what was supposed to do. And if we know Florence now of its greatness, is because of its art. San Marco altarpiece, also by Fra Angelico. Of course, even if it was Renaissance, it was early Renaissance, and the artists were still very much anchored in the Gothic traditions, in the sacred art. So all the artistic subjects had to do with with spirit, with faith, with religion. The crucified Christ, a detail also Fra Angelico. And yes, you look at the painting and then you remember that it was a banker who sustained this painter, and not just him. San Marco in Florence, the day of the judgment, upper panel of an altarpiece. It shows the precision, detail, and color required in a commissioned work, a very ample work. So even if Florence today as well continues to, smell, so to speak, of money, what actually uplifts the whole city, it emanates, the city emanates culture, and it's because of the great artists and architects and so on, who developed their works, yes, on the less than pure ground that was came into being because of the bank transactions. Fra Filippo Lippi, look at him, also known as Lippo Lippi, was an Italian painter of the Quattrocento, the 15th century, and already we see here a human being, not abstracted, not stylized, but as a real human being. So there were already signs of the emancipation of man, even if that man doesn't look like this gentleman here. Is it a self-portrait? Perhaps doesn't look, very romantic necessarily, but maybe his soul was. The devotional image of the Madonna and Child before a golden curtain. Beautiful, this is something we don't do because we don't have any longer. We are not anchored in that, sublime and totally absorbing faith that these people had. What painter would paint something like this today? No painter, really. And if he does, it would be a very unconvincing painting because the times changed. How could you paint something like this when there are highways outside of your window making an unbelievable noise, and with countless T-models, so to speak, the car that left the plant in Detroit to attack the world. Adoration in the forest. What adoration in the forest? I just mentioned the highway. You know, what forest? What adoration in the forest? Imagine, you know, I mean, you know very well, in Romania, everybody talks about, you know, highways. You know, we need another tronson, another segment of the highway. And the highway is almost like a national obsession. And unless we have, you know, highways to cover the whole country in a maddening way, we are not happy. Because why? Because we need to run as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible from left to right and from up to down or north to south and vice versa. So of course there is no room any longer in our lives for the adoration of the Magi, you know, like, or the adoration in the forest. It was a different world, but it all started kind of then during the Renaissance. At that time, the artists and Cosimo de' Medici, I'm sure they would not have imagined what was to follow. No, impossible. Madonna and Child, the same painter. He was, look at this, the painter, he was Fra Filippo Lippi. He was a monk. You know, how many painters today are monks? I don't know of any. Anyway, Madonna and Child, a tempera on panel by Filippo Lippi, Fra Filippo Lippi. You know, it is the same religious subject that countless painters painted, and he did too. And the banker sponsored the artist to do just what you look at. Donatello, it was mentioned in the first text that I read that apparently, I mean, not apparently, he was sponsored and sustained by Cosimo de' Medici to produce the first male nude statue since the antiquity. This was Donatello, I imagine, himself. This is his David, because we are talking about David. Very different from Michelangelo's David, but it was a revolutionary piece. This would have been inconceivable in the Middle Ages. Inconceivable to show a, you know, a human being in the nude, you know, having still a certain dignity. And I mean, he was the one who fought with the Goliath and won the battle. So, you know, a new time, a new age was announced through this sculpture. But not only through this sculpture, but it's still a distance from this statue and the paintings we saw before, you know, like the adoration in the forest. Judith and Holofernes. This is in Florence, outdoors, and it's a moving sculpture, of course, or statue. What are our artists doing? You know, well, society doesn't need them. I keep saying that the so-called past has no meaning unless its relevance makes us act in a certain way, and its relevance resides in its not passing. So this art, in my opinion, is useless if it doesn't nourish us with ideas, with impulses, with inspiration to create a world equally rich culturally and artistically. If we just look at it from a distant, well, in relation with the future, and we consider it a past artistic event, is not enough. We have to connect with this past in one way or another. Michelozzi. Now we arrive finally at architecture. He was the favorite architect of Cosimo de' Medici. I guess with good reasons. This was early Renaissance. And Michelozzi built a very important palazzo. You are going to see it. Michelozzo di Bartolomeo Michelozzi was an Italian architect and sculptor. How many architects today also do sculpture? Not too many. Why? Because Homo economicus won the battle with the sculptor or the painter. You know, most of architects today, they are, you know, or many of them are bureaucrats, you know, technomen or technologists, you know, economical concerns occupy their minds most of the time. What architect today practices sculpture in a major way? No, because we live in very pragmatic and prosaic times. Considered one of the great pioneers of architecture during the Renaissance, Michelozzo was a favored Medici architect who was extensively employed by Cosimo de' Medici. He was a pupil of Lorenzo Ghiberti, was a sculptor in his early years, and later collaborated with Donatello, the one whose David we just saw. You know, when I read these words, I pity myself, you know, because this architect, he worked with sculptors before he offered himself to the task of building buildings. And we severed almost completely the relationship between architecture and art. Even if we claim that we descend into our time from the Renaissance, known primarily for designing Palazzo Medici Riccardi in Florence, and you are going to see it, he is often overshadowed by his contemporaries Donatello in sculpture and Brunelleschi in architecture. He remained for his biographers a shadowy, active, competent, second-rate figure circling around the glowing glory of the two dominant masters. So Donatello in sculpture and indeed Brunelleschi, the great Brunelleschi in architecture. Angelo Fabroni in 1789, who said, Cosimo loved Michelozzo dearly and relied on him not only because of his natural talents, he considered nobody, not even Brunelleschi, superior in all architectural judgments, but also because of his good qualities and worthy character. So we see a portrait now made by Fra Angelico of Michelozzo. Here he is. He does look a little bit like an architect. I mean, I wish we have architects who have this, you know, melancholia, but this thinking posture. Anyway, the facade of Palazzo Medici in Florence, which he did, and it's called now Palazzo Medici. Before it was, I mean, it is called the Palazzo Medici Riccardi, and it's just around the corner from a famous, very famous church by Brunelleschi. So just around the corner here, you go a little bit to the right, you come across, I mean, you see the elevation of San Lorenzo, the great, great, great building by the great, great, great Brunelleschi. But this palazzo is also great itself. And look at this stone, you know, starting with big pieces of stone and then smaller. And then, so the building grows from the rawness of matter, of the earth, towards more rarefied, aesthetically speaking, forms of architectural expression. So it is an ascension from the earth towards the above, towards the sky. The courtyard, well, I'll show some other pictures of this important building in Florence, and it's just 8-10 minutes walking away from Santa Maria del Fiore, where Brunelleschi built the incredible dome. Anyway, I become nostalgic now because I do miss the idealism of its art. And so this is the courtyard of the Palazzo Medici Riccardi. The San Marco in Florence, will come back to some buildings by him. This was also done by Michelozzo. It's a monastery with a courtyard, and it's It's a work that, again, at that time in the Renaissance, I would say they lived at some kind of a conjunction between the sacred and the profane. There was the sacred program still very much alive, coming from the Gothic times, from the Middle Ages, but there was also the emancipation of man, as illustrated in the Palazzo that we just saw. The cloister of San Marco in Florence, it's serene, it's indeed a cloister, and yeah, even the program itself, cloister is something that we don't do any longer. Palazzo Medici Riccardi, the one that I already mentioned, we are going to see other pictures with it. And if you arrive in Florence in this other corner, so this is Palazzo Medici Riccardi, but here in this corner, a few times when I went to Florence, there was a man selling books, secondhand books, very nice, most of them on art, but not only on art. Anyway, and if you walk on this street downwards, very close is the famous Santa Maria del Fiore. So this is, we look at this building and we realize that this was a Renaissance palace built for Medici, for Cosimo de Medici, Michelozzo. And this is another building. No, it's not another building. It confuses me a little bit. Let me double check. It's the same building, but it looks different for some reason. I think this is San Lorenzo here, but this one I am a little bit confused. Anyway, this is indeed Palazzo Medici Riccardi, and this is the courtyard. What can we say? A different world with statues, with all kinds of ornaments on the walls. It's true, it was not social housing. It was built for the ruler of Florence, but still. And it's not the only palazzo that was built in Florence. There were others, and not all of them for the Medicis. I don't have in this presentation, I have another presentation with Florence where I have pictures of this building at night. I was living not too far away. There was an inexpensive, very nice hostel here. And I was there with students, and very conveniently located right near this great palazzo and around the corner from San Lorenzo. Now, the interior is possible, receive some changes in time. I don't know if all these, certainly the chairs are not from the early Renaissance, but maybe even the paintings of the ceiling, I don't know. Anyway, so this is Michelozzo, the court architect, so to speak. He was the architect that Cosimo de' Medici loved the most and trusted the most. Not a little thing when you consider that Brunelleschi was around. Brunelleschi, who had genius, without doubt, and who died apparently bankrupt. Well, again, there is no contradiction between having genius and dying bankrupt. In fact, somehow they almost complement each other in strange ways. So, Palazzo Medici Riccardi by Michelozzo, built during the time of Cosimo de' Medici. And for him, it was a model for other palazzos that were built at that time. And it's it's not to be forgotten that this was built more than 5 centuries earlier. So I wonder where our buildings will be in 5 centuries. I think the absence of idealism is fatal to us. You know, if you were immersed in reading Plato and translating his works and founding a Neoplatonic academy, when you have this kind of preoccupations, to think of the destiny of a building in terms of centuries perhaps was not so exceptional or unusual, because Plato's philosophy forced you to think kind of in eternal terms, idealistic terms, not just about the present, but about the continuum. But we don't read Plato any longer. Would be even almost strange to suggest now at the Order of Architects to initiate maybe some courses on Platonic philosophy or Neoplatonic. By the way of this, I will talk on the 1st of October about Ficino. Marsilio Ficino, who was actually the man that Cosimo de' Medici employed to run the Neoplatonic Academy. And apparently he coined the term Platonic love, Ficino, and it will be his birthday on October 1st. What a beautiful occasion to talk just a few days after we talk about Cosimo de' Medici, about Ficino, a great scholar, a great Renaissance scholar. Look at these stones. I mean, I have been there, I caress these huge stones. I love them. They represent the tumultuousness of the earth, the telluric forces of the earth. And look how the second floor is different as it's supposed to be. I love stones in general, and I love them in this building. They are indeed raw, and you can trust stones. You can trust them. I could look at this fragment of this building for hours, perhaps, and not be bored. Just at what you look at now. I remember the alchemists saying, I don't know Latin, but I know the translation of this, and it's not difficult to kind of understand what it says. Aurum nostrum non est aurum vulgi, meaning our gold is not the vulgar one. This is what, in Carl Jung's opinion, represented the credo of the best alchemists. Aurum nostrum non est aurum vulgi. Our gold is not the vulgar one, it's the psychological one. And when I look at this building by Michelozzo, I see that the architect was, as he moved upwards with his building, he didn't use these stones at the top of the building or, the second floor. No, he used them, when they touched the earth. And the building became more and more subtle and more rarefied as it moved upwards towards the sky. And it was, in a way, a normal sequence. I'm not sure that today we still believe in in the normality of this so-called sequence. You look, there are 3 registers here, 3 different ways of building, all in the same building. Raw and rough at the base, much less so in the middle, And here we have a smooth surface. Why smooth? Because we are approaching God, we are approaching heaven, we are approaching the above. So you see the translation from the earth towards the above, towards the sky. And then we have, yes, the cornice is dramatic, because in a way it's almost like taking a last look back to the earth before we launch our flight towards the angels. These men still had God in their souls. They were still emerging from the Gothic times, from the Middle Ages, and they asserted the ascension of man, but they still were connected with the spirituality, I would say, of the Middle Ages, of the Gothic times. Yesterday, I presented works by Giotto, because it was about Saint Francis of Assisi, and the Giotto series or cycle about the life of Saint Francis of Assisi. And Giotto also announced the Gothic, the Renaissance, but he was still a Gothic painter. And by the way of Giotto, we should not forget that the Campanile of Santa Maria del Fiore was built by him, a painter. Yes, Florence offered painters the chance to build if they had talent and they had something to say, so to speak. This is a beautiful palazzo, and yes, it's hard not to be nostalgic. Yeah, this is in fact the bookstore that I mentioned to you, right here, a little place where you can find books. That's very nice. So you can buy with €2 a nice art book from this man. Now, of course, the rooms inside the palazzo are not for proletarians, unless they destroy the Bastille and in the name of égalité, liberté, fraternité, they sit for a while on the comfortable sofas of such a palazzo, only for a short while, of course. There is not a single square inch or square centimeter of the walls uncovered by dreams, that is, paintings, frescoes. Now, San Marco, also by the convent of San Marco, also by the architect of Cosimo de' Medici, the fundamental basis of all monastic compounds built by architects during the Renaissance. This was one of Michelozzo's first and most influential architectural projects in Florence. Constructed at the expense of Cosimo dei Medici, the project began sometime between the years 1437 and 1438. Reconstruction included a church, sacristy, cloister, monastic living quarters, and the library. San Marco has been called the first Renaissance church, though it seems to be a compromise between the Trecento tradition and the Renaissance spirit. The plain white walls without frescoes differ from the coloristic tradition of the Trecento and were essential to Michelozzo's architectural concepts and preference for large, unadorned surfaces, subtly articulated by necessary structural members in gray pietra serena. So a different kind of building as compared to the palazzo. I don't know if these ornaments, I don't think they belong to Michelozzo. I think they were, I imagine they were added to the building later. Of course, there was a library here, it had to be, and the courtyard. the library of San Marco, but this is not the San Marco in Venice. We are still in Florence. Because churches were also places of learning. It was not just about preaching, it was also about learning. This is important to know and to notice. Books were copied, books were translated. They were truly centers of learning. The choir of the Santissima Annunziata, this is a building also done by Michelozzo, and on the right is a famous building by Brunelleschi, his contemporary, Ospedale degli Innocenti, the hospital for children, and but this was done by Michelozzo. Inside, surprise, you wouldn't expect this majestic interior from the outside, and it is truly majestic. So here is the Ospedale degli Innocenti by Brunelleschi, and this is the building by Michelozzo. And we just saw images from the nave inside this part of this church. And if you walk on this narrow street here, after you maybe have a little lunch here with Chinese food in the corner of the street, as I did, you'll reach Santa Maria del Fiore, the great, the center actually of Florence, and the incredible dome of Brunelleschi, in whose shadow Alberti said the whole of Tuscany could find the room. He exaggerated, but the dimensions of the dome are amazing, and in contrast with the narrow streets of Florence, even more so. So Michelozzo here, and here Brunelleschi. So this is the plan. We looked at the elevation of the building, and we looked also at the nave of the building inside and the courtyard. You know, it's a more complex ensemble. And here you can see Michelozzo here, and here you see the Ospedale degli Innocenti by Brunelleschi. They are good neighbors here in Piazza Santa Annunziata. And this street indeed goes this way to Santa Maria del Fiore and the amazing dome by Brunelleschi. Otherwise, life today goes on as we know it. I have seen also homeless men sleeping here under this arcade by Michelozzo. Santa Croce. The Basilica di Santa Croce is the principal Franciscan church in Florence and the minor basilica of the Roman Catholic Church. It is situated on the Piazza di Santa Croce, about 800 meters southeast of the Duomo. The site, when first chosen, was in marshland outside the city walls. It is the burial place of some of the most illustrious Italians, such as Michelangelo, Galileo, Machiavelli, the poet Foscolo, the philosopher Gentile, and the composer Rossini. Thus, it is known also as the Temple of the Italian Glories, Tempio dell'Itale Glorie. So again, Michelangelo is buried there, Galileo, Machiavelli, this poet I don't know, Foscolo, the philosopher Gentile, and the composer Rossini. This is the building. And, you know, it is in Florence. And what else can we say? You know, it's hard not to be moved. You know, we talk about Michelangelo, Donatello, Leonardo, all these glories of Renaissance art. But the question is, what do we do to express our souls equally tormented, equally troubled, and equally thirsty for beauty in equal terms? What do we do? What can we do? And I think we can. But I think it's needed a change in our consciousness, a change in mentality. Instead of running madly on the highway, and I will talk next about that, maybe we can offer some time from our lives to what is called the contemplative life, vita contemplativa. This is actually the building before the facade was done. And with this, we end this short incursion into the time of Cosimo de' Medici.